there's a very strict social contract there. And if you break that social contract, you're like immediately deported.
There has to be a little bit of equality. We can't have, you know, a few people amassing, the wealth of the world, and people are starving on the streets. It just doesn't make sense.
I'm very Emirati in my position there,
Mm.
right? I I I love the Emirati tax system. I believe it works everywhere.
They have done nothing except wreak havoc and terror for our faith and our religion.
Professed values of the Western countries, democracy and constitutional and human rights, at least they should speak about this.
And it's like, I feel like religion just is making it worse. They say they believe in God, but I think they're just anxious.
Before we talk about politics, let's look at the fundamental things.
That when we stand up to those who oppress our communities, that Allah accepts from us that as a form of jihad.
And it requires people with guts to follow God in an era that everyone does whatever is right in their eyes.
Will you distance yourself from those who think differently? Or will you join us at the table and talk about what is really important? This is the Al-Ma'idah Initiative, conversation without compromise.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Al-Ma'idah Initiative podcast. Today I am here with my friend Sana. We've been trying to get a podcast together for the last 2-3 years, and we finally made it happen today. We're going to be covering just a range of interesting topics that are challenging the world today. How would you introduce and describe yourself?
Oh my gosh. That is like the toughest question, James. You know that. So people say, who are you, or what do you do, or where are you from? Okay, let me try to keep it as simple as I can. Yeah. I am somebody who was born in Ethiopia. I am from Hadramaut in Yemen, and I lived practically most of my life in the UAE. I am American, and I went to university in Tennessee. And my second home is in Seattle. So I live between Dubai / Abu Dhabi, Seattle, and Addis Ababa. And so I am, because of that, maybe, my identity, I see myself as an interculturalist. I'm someone who's always seeing all the different people and seeing how common sometimes we are, so the commonalities, not common is not a good word, the universal values that we have, the wonderful things that make us human. And I've always, for as long as I can remember, I tried to connect people. So when I first moved to Abu Dhabi, for example, I was a journalist a long, long time ago, maybe before you were born. And we're not going to talk into that. And I'm not going to answer your question on how old I am, okay? But let it be, for the record, I went there fresh from university, and I was a journalist. I was the first female Arab journalist in Abu Dhabi. And I always, from early on, I was wanting to bring people together. So later on, my career sort of changed, and I moved to Seattle, Washington, lived here for a while, went back again, and I've set up different platforms. So that comes back to your question on what. So I create platforms that connect people, that spread good values, on sustainability, inclusivity, compassion, and all of that. So I try to tick all the boxes with different platforms. So that's sort of who I am.
So we've got several sort of contentious social issues. And this is interesting to me because I've been thinking about all of this. And a lot of my framework for looking at this is I've traveled a lot in the last year. I've been to Japan, I've been to Saudi Arabia, I have been to both Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And almost all of these places seem to be doing better with at least some of these issues than we are in the US and in the UK, where I just got back from as well. So let's just jump straight into the deep end of controversial topics. And I'm going to ask you, what do you think good immigration policy is?
Okay, like all of the places that I've lived in, ever since I was a kid, were vibrant communities of diverse populations. So in Addis Ababa, for example, we lived among the Armenians and the Greeks and the Indians, the Ethiopians, so I always grew up in a place where there was just this rich, vibrant fabric of society. So I love that, and I love the fact that it builds understanding and cohesion and human values as well. So then in Abu Dhabi, look at Abu Dhabi and Dubai. They are just incredible ecosystems, landscapes that show you how people from different countries can come together and they can live peacefully, and in a way that furthers values and amplifies goodness. And so I believe in people being able to live wherever they want. How you break it into like laws and policies and all of that is where it gets murky, because at the end of the day, it depends on who are the policymakers, why they're doing what they're doing. A lot of them show biases, for or against certain peoples. And I don't think that's right. I think people should always be given a chance to thrive wherever they want to. And the more diversity you have, the better. And a good example of that, I used to always talk about Silicon Valley. The one thing that makes Silicon Valley so exceptional is the fact that you have people from different nations. You go into a place and, there's a very interesting expression, and it's spontaneous, these spontaneous meetings that you have, and how, you talk to someone and it creates an idea and then it furthers it, and then a group of people meet, and then suddenly you have, the perfect garden to bloom all of these incredible ideas that further humanity. So the idea of diversity is brilliant, because the more you have people from India, from whatever country, you have the Brits, you have the Canadians, you have the Africans and all. The more you bring people from diverse backgrounds and nationalities together, the more you will have broader representation for whatever you're building, and the more you're going to be able to serve a broader segment of humanity, which is why I am always, even with the Global Brain Trust, the new platform that I built, it's about bringing people together, different voices, different opinions. Like today, James, me and you are probably going to have a fight a few times, and I'm looking forward to
I
it.
expect so.
But the point is, it's okay to have different ideas. It's okay to be different. But the more we meet, the more we can express those ideas and share them and respect each other's views.
So let me give a little bit of pushback, or maybe it's not pushback, because in general, I actually love living in a very multicultural society. I first really experienced that when I go to church once a month in London. It was great. There were people from everywhere: Korea, Africa, the Middle East, everywhere, and I loved it. And since the fall of Kabul, I have been really involved in helping Afghans apply for asylum, people who've been running from the Taliban.
Right.
However, I meet a pretty large segment of Afghans here who are on asylum, but think that Afghanistan is a better place now the Taliban have taken over. My opinion, there is zero reason that person should be able to apply for asylum here.
But you know what? Taking asylum aside, I think people and I know this is very idealistic, people should be able to live wherever they want to live. This is sort of my belief. If a country feels that they can add to that country, whether it's through special visa programs or whatever, they can open it up. But the more you restrict movement, the more you create situations where people come in through other corridors, unofficial means, or smuggling, and coming in through ways that you don't want. And this is where it also gives birth to very illegal schemes. So the more things are transparent and clear and and non-biased, it's such a shame, like like the shooting that happened, the Seattle Center shooting. It's such a sad thing. We were actually planning to go that day of the shooting. Last minute, we decided not to. But the first comments that came, when that happened, the first comments were, "Oh, it must be Muslim. It must be a Muslim. It must be," and it just broke my heart that people would assume things without knowing, without understanding what's going on. And so this is sort of where, when you have people from different countries coming together, whether it is by design or by spontaneity or by just the community, the fabric of community coming together, the more they understand each other and they don't see the other as somebody who's unfavorable. So I respect your view, honestly. I respect it, but I feel like a lot of it just goes back to the way laws are constructed, policymakers come in with their own agendas, and just overall lack of compassionate lawmaking.
So again, I like immigration, but I think it would be a lot better if there was a much clearer sense of what the deal is for someone who's coming here, right?
Absolutely.
So for example, like this is what I think UAE does so well, and it's part of the reasons it's so safe. That there's a very strict social contract there, and if you break that social contract, you're like immediately deported.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a great system. And I think if America had immigration laws that were more like that it's like, okay, so if you want to live in America, here's what that means. We are capitalists. That's it. Khalas, right? That's our deal. We're a market economy, and this is our government system, and we believe in freedom of expression and all these things. And as long as you're accepting that deal, you're welcome, right? You can come. But if you start trying to like come from somewhere else and try and like upend the system, then they should just be immediately deported.
Going into any country means you have to follow the country's rules.
100%.
Period.
Yeah.
Wherever it is. This is what I think, and you're right. It is about transparency. It's about understanding also the rules of the country. This is why when immigrants come, they should be taught what are the value systems, what they can and cannot do. So I agree. I think it's so important to set the rules and to be very transparent and to communicate them well as well.
Yeah. So I think if we kind of start there and it works, it's much easier to build that out, right? Because I think part of the problem with how the West has handled immigration is that they've been too soft on that initial, here's what the deal is, living here. And if you just spelled that out better, then immigration as a whole would be a much better experience, because then everyone here knows, okay, everybody who's come here gets it to some extent, because that's the vetting in, say, UAE, right? Everybody who goes there knows that you're going to respect the host culture, and if you respect the host culture, there's like tremendous amounts of opportunities.
Absolutely.
For you. And I think
yeah.
And I think we did that.
Absolutely.
The deal needs to be less vague when people are coming here, and I think if we did that, immigration would improve.
Yeah, educating people about the ways of the country, the rules of the country, and just so they know, because some people also inadvertently may break the rules as well. So it's all about communication. It's about, in Arabic we say the majlises, where people come together, they break bread together, they have coffee, tea together, and they exchange ideas. And again, they may agree on something, but at least there will be a proper discussion of all the issues, and there will be transparency in whatever actions taken.
Right, right, right. So I've had to do things here, like we had to help an Afghan girl escape from a forced marriage. She was 16 years old and she was being forced to marry her cousin. That is normal in Afghanistan. But there needs to be a little bit more light on the situation here, so stuff like that, like, cannot happen. Part of that comes from the government. A lot of that, though, just comes from society.
Correct.
I really believe that a lot of what needs to happen here, like I was just in England thinking about like Islam in England right now, the Muslim community of England. There's a lot of controversy about that right now. And being there, I kind of realized that probably 20% of it is government, 80% of it is just cultural. If regular people step up, meet their neighbors, have these conversations,
absolutely,
a lot of the big issues get solved for the most part. Not entirely, but for the most part.
Like in Islam and culturally, your neighbor is someone that is closer to you than your family, you know? So it is just opening your door, listening to other people, and trying to understand their cultures as well. And so, yeah, it is a coming together of people, I think, would solve a lot of problems, to be honest.
Right. So I think we agree probably more than we disagree on this, right? I'm sure we can find the exact how we put pen to paper on this, but in principle, we like immigration, and everyone should respect the culture that they're moving to, right?
Absolutely. And you know, even the problem that you isolated with this marriage, it shouldn't happen to any girl, any nationality, any religion. Women should be able to choose who they want to marry, period. You know? And so I hear of stories that happen in other societies as well, where women are not treated well, or old people are not treated well, or children are not treated well. So the wonderful thing about our two religions is we have a certain set of values and we agree on them. The one thing that makes it difficult is the execution of this. And so our job is to raise the bar, remind people that these are values that are universal, and it shouldn't happen in any society.
So let's take a jump to our next controversial topic here. We live in Seattle, so we have to talk about homelessness. You went first last time, so I'm going to go first.
Go first
this time.
Okay.
So this is a good week for me to talk about this because I just flew to Idaho and I went through the new extension in the Seattle airport, and it's amazing. It's clean, it's beautiful, it's safe. Whereas downtown is dirty, it's dangerous, and it smells bad. And a lot of that is because Seattle has an out of control homeless problem. In fact, in general, the West Coast of America has this issue. So my take here is that I really believe before anything else, cities need to prioritize commerce and public safety before anything else. I think those things actually need to start as a non-negotiable before we start talking about compassion. And I know that sounds heartless, but the fact is, unless you have wealth and public safety, you're not really in the position to actually help anyone else. So I kind of think we kind of got to start with like zero tolerance for people's nonsense. Whereas in Seattle, people see these people as victims of the system, rather than insisting on a baseline. From there, I think mandatory drug treatment is really important. That my position is, if you're on the streets and you're high, you have two options. You go to jail or you go to rehab. That's it. And as a Christian, where this comes from for me is there's something really important in the Bible called grace, which means when somebody admits their shortcomings to God, there's infinite amount of mercy from God, right? However, what people confuse that with is lowering their standards. It's having low expectations of people, and that's not the same thing. Grace is having a high expectations of people, a clear standard of what human behavior is supposed to be. And when people fall short of that, there is compassion, but it's not the same thing as letting people off easy, right? So Seattle just becomes, oh, well, you've had these hard circumstances, therefore you're allowed to be the way you are indefinitely. And that's not grace. That's not compassion. It's just lowering your standards. That's my take on homelessness. What do you think?
Oh my gosh. This is a topic that I talk about all the time. What you isolated is one piece of a very big puzzle, in my view. And it is a discussion that I've had with people across the board. I've even sat with homeless people to find out what their circumstances are. And it is complicated. I remember I had coffee with Melinda Gates about a year ago, 2 years ago. And I said, Melinda, you and Bill help a lot of people. But here in Seattle, your home, look at all these people. And right outside of our cafe was a small tent, and there was a homeless person. And she said, it's much more complicated than that. She said, it's drugs. A lot of these people cannot be helped. And there was a lot of empathy and sympathy. It was a beautiful discussion we had. But I'll tell you where I stand on this. So Yemen, for example, is one of the poorest countries in the world, right? You would never see a homeless person in the street, ever. Why is that? And I'll tell you where some of the whole value thing comes into play. For somebody to be living in the street, it is seen as a disgrace, as a shame for the whole community. Somebody has to take that person. The family bond is very strong. You take care of your kin, even if they're like, I don't know, not so related to you. You take them in. You take a neighbor. You see a child on the street. Somebody has to take them in. Otherwise, it's a blight for the whole of the community, you know. And so, with a lot of the homeless people, this comment that it's a drug problem. Yes, but where does the drug problem come? Does it come before, or does it come after? There's a lot of things that have to be looked at. In some cases, you see somebody got into drugs as a way to survive the streets, because people come in, they pester you, they beat you up, the women get raped. I mean, we're talking about very serious circumstances. So sometimes they take drugs to be able to deal with all of these inequities, these difficulties. I remember in Addis Ababa, when Addis Ababa is transforming, honestly, I can't say anything negative about Addis. However, I saw a bunch of kids and they were sniffing something, and they were out in the streets, and they were selling, little toys and stuff. And I said, what are they sniffing? They said they're sniffing glue. And I said, why are they sniffing glue? They said to keep warm. So you have to try to figure out the reason for something happening. And James, we have to agree that life expenses have, inflation. They're driving people into very difficult circumstances. I remember a few months ago, last visit here, there was this gentleman who had his dog, and he looked very proper, as you say in England, really well dressed and all of that, standing in the corner of Gilman village, close to Safeway, He had his dog, and he was begging, you know, asking for handouts. And I thought to myself, he must be on drugs. Why didn't he get a job? And I went in and out, and I bought some stuff, walked around, and it just bothered me. So I went over to him and I said, can't you get a job? You know, I'm sorry, you know. And I went in and I bought him groceries. I bought a bag of groceries and I gave it to him because I thought to myself, if I give him money, he's gonna buy drugs. So I bought him groceries. I said, this is free. He thanked me, and then I said, why are you here? He looked behind and he said, do you see these apartments? I used to live there, he said. And I said, so what changed? He said, life got hard, he said. And he said, the money that and I said, why don't you work? He said, I do work. I work in PCC, he said. But for me to afford to go to PCC, I need gas money. The money that I collect from here is the money that pays me to go to PCC to work. And I said, so where do you live now? He pointed to his van. It was a green van. It was in the parking lot. He said, I live there. And I said, will this change? He said, things are expensive. I can't afford all of these things. So I hope one day I will. I'm applying and all of that. And he said, I believe in God. He was Hindu. And, you know, I said some words, you know, inshallah. He said, you say inshallah, and you say bismillah. No. And we found commonality in just these words that linked him to the divine. And he said, I believe I will have a better life. And so what bothers me about this whole homeless thing is how people view the homeless as pests, you know, just they're invisible, they're pests. Sometimes they don't even talk to them. And I remember we visited my daughter in Stanford, and she said, Mom, a funny thing happened to me today. She said, there was this guy, African-American elderly guy. He was walking around and he was asking people for the time. What time is it? And people just walked past him. What time is it? You know. And she said, I thought it was just odd that nobody acknowledged him. So she walked over to him and she said, it's actually 5 o'clock. He said, thank you. He said, thank you, because people don't see me anymore. I feel I'm invisible. And he said, now I can go to the homeless shelter because it opens now, so I can go there now. And it made me sad. And, you know, I'll tell you something that's very interesting. 1 week later, we came back to Seattle. My husband and I were going down 2nd Street. And there was this lady, elderly woman, with a shopping cart. And she was asking people. And nobody was talking to her. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is Allah. See how Allah just flips it and he's testing you to see how you react. He said, Ali, we have to go and talk to her. So we crossed the street and we said, what do you need? She said, oh, thank you so much for stopping. She said, I was feeling invisible. Nobody's talking to me. We said, and my husband said, where do you need to go? She said, I need to go to the Social Security department. He pointed to it, and we gave her a bit of money and she went off. So these are the things. I think it is a deeper problem. Some people are there not because they, you know, they're reckless or they're taking drugs. It's because circumstances have forced them there.
100%. There are definitely people like that. However, there's also a lot of people.
Oh, there are.
Right. And so this is part of the problem. When the people who are like genuine threats, drains on society, whatever you want to call, right? Like, you know, I had the stroller stolen from my car, had to track it down via app. I got it back. I have a friend who, a homeless lady, threw a bottle, hit her in the head when she was, you know, on the light rail with her kids. You know, the lady got like, you know, a day in jail for it and just let straight back on the streets. I saw a homeless man punch a woman in the face here. So there's like, because the city doesn't do anything about stuff like that, it means that regular people are getting rightly tired of that kind of thing. And it's actually really important, even when you live in a circumstance like that, to still see people as the image of God in that as well, right? Just because there are lots of sort of problem people out on the streets that the government's not doing their job for, doesn't mean everyone's like that. And I think it's not harsher crackdowns or more compassion. I actually think you need to have both of those simultaneously. Because if you talk about, say, Yemen or the UAE, right, what you're saying is true, but try dealing drugs in any of those countries, see what happens to you.
No, I agree with you, James. I agree that if you're taking drugs and you know you're told to go in, I like your choices. You either go to jail or you go to rehab. Totally agreed with that. But you need to be given a second chance.
100%.
You know, to change your ways and all of that. And also, I know with a lot of the homeless shelters, so we actually stopped at the library and I was looking at the homeless shelters and I saw there are a lot of shelters. But I was speaking to one of the people who are homeless and I said, why don't you go to the shelter? They said, the shelter is so far away. And for me to get a job, it's very difficult to get a job in society. So it is a very complex problem. And I know there have to be creative answers for this. We know, for example, in Japan, they have very tiny living spaces. Maybe these are pods that need to be built, but in places that are accessible to the economy of the place, so somebody can actually dress up and go. Which reminds me of, I went to South Lake, is it South Lake Union, right? Is that, yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a lady living in a tent, and the tent was just clean and organized, and she had flowers in the front, and she had a chair in the middle. And then she got out, and I just observed her. I was having coffee, and I observed her. She got up, James, and she came out in this very elegant outfit, and she put on her high-heeled shoes, and she took her purse, and she put on her makeup and all of that, and she went out of her tent. This tells you that it is this woman is probably out to look for work. Maybe she works somewhere and people don't know where she lives. So I think it's much more nuanced than we think.
100%.
I agree with you that there has to be, certain things that they need to fulfill. Otherwise, I really think it has to be studied well, and it is a one-on-one person solution.
100%.
But people have to be a little bit more compassionate. So I'll tell you, so going back to Yemen, and a lot of the Arab countries are similar, the concept of waqf, we have something called waqf, which is you have to take care of others, period, And so what rich people do, and there are so many rich people here, James, so many rich people, they buy a home, a big complex where people can live. It's almost like a safe space. So I'll tell you about my friend who left Ethiopia and went to Yemen and needed a little bit of a short stay somewhere. So there are these houses that are run by very rich people, right? It's a big house. Young people go there. What's it called? It's a midway thing, you go there, you live for as long as you want, you pull out a mattress, you sleep on the mattress. It's not a proper place. It's just a place for you to spend the night and try to move your life ahead. And there's a team that do the cleaning and all of that. And there's a book. When you go in, the guy asks you, he says, James, how long do you want to stay here? You say, I don't know. I just came from, this country or that country, and I'm, looking for a job. He said, okay. So, and he records your name and he says, what do you need to make things happen? You say, I just need $10 a day just until I find my way. He says that. And he says, so with this, do you want it to be considered charity, or are you going to pay it back? You say, oh, no, I want this to be charity. Please, I don't know if I'm, going to be able to pay it. And that's fine as well. Or you say, I'll pay it back. They take your number and all of that. So there are proper systems to help people, especially traverse these difficult times.
That's great. I think the combination of the compassion is very necessary. I think in Seattle, the sort of conservative and liberal sides of this probably need to work together better. I think what you'll find if you talk to a lot of conservatives in Seattle, their views are not formed by distance or lack of compassion. A lot of the time, it's formed by people who've kind of been like burned out trying to help somebody who's not ready to be helped a lot of the time. So, I know what that's like to pour resources into somebody who just isn't actually ready to get better sometimes, and that can be really difficult. So I think more discernment on that end, followed by vast compassion, is two really important ingredients to making this work. So quick transition point here. You talked about the generosity of the rich. Do you think we should tax the rich more?
I do. But the problem with that is rich people move. They go to other states that are much more amenable to their lifestyles. And it's funny because for me, I went to university in Knoxville, Tennessee, small, university town. Now Tennessee is becoming the place where a lot of companies are moving. Did you know that? HQs are moving to Tennessee. In-N-Out, Starbucks is setting something there. A lot of the big companies are going there. Why? Because of the taxation system. So it's such a shame that when these multi-billionaires, we can say billionaires, they feel a little bit of a pinch, they go to a place that doesn't tax them. And I wonder why. And I think to myself, it's a value issue, James. I'm sorry, but this is a value issue. They should realize that they can't take all of their wealth with them when they die. The pharaohs tried it. It didn't work, So, and it makes me sad that they feel like, they can't contribute more to society. The reason the Europe, for example, a lot of the Scandinavian countries work is because they tax a lot, but people live comfortably, It's a caretaker government almost, You don't pay for this, you don't pay for that. So there has to be a little bit of equality. We can't have, a few people amassing, the wealth of the world, and people are starving on the streets. It just doesn't make sense. And that is where that compassion anchor has to come. And it all comes down to values, which is why even early on when we started this discussion, what we have, especially if we're even talking at faith's level, it's about compassion. It's inalienable. It's one of those things that have to be built into everything. Kindness, compassion, and also family values. I was shocked one time. I had to go to the court, for just to renew some papers, and there was this lady running around, and she was saying, "I need to get the squatter out of my house. I need to get the squatter out of my house." And she said, "And I've been coming here. They haven't been helping me, And then I said, "Who is the squatter?" She says, "My son. He's 18 years old. He won't leave the house." I mean, what kind of... I was shocked. An 18-year-old. My sons, at one point, they didn't have jobs. They were with me, and I loved every moment with them, living in Abu Dhabi at one point during COVID. They were struggling to find jobs. So where is that human compassion? And this is where the churches, the mosques, the temples, they have to be talking about these human values. We can't throw people away just because they've had bad luck.
So my personal take on this, right, is in the Bible, God asks you to give 10% to God, to the poor, to help your neighbor. If the government's asking for more than 9%, I think that's a little blasphemous. So I would like to see a flat tax rate of 9%. I believe the wealthy should take care of the poor, but I believe that using government coercion to make the wealthy pay for the poor is fundamentally immoral. I'm very Emirati in my position there, right? I love the Emirati tax system. I believe it works everywhere. I believe having low taxes and high public safety is just fundamentally good for human flourishing, right? Because, again, we have higher taxes here than we would have in the UAE. Yeah, there's far more homelessness here than there is in the UAE. So there is a way to get much more out of your money than we're getting for your money. So I think, and I run a nonprofit. My entire existence is predicated on the generosity of people who are not mostly wealthy, but generosity of people who are wealthy on a global standard. And it's given purely through generosity. There's no coercive factor in that at all. So somebody who gets money that way, I'm very uncomfortable pushing a button that would try and take those money from those people and allocate it in places that they haven't themselves chosen, right? So I think culture and community solves that. I don't think taxes solves it. So I don't believe in taxing the rich more.
Well, I'll tell you, with us, the reason it works is because we do zakat and we do sadaqah, So every year we take 2.5% and we give it to the poor, and that is compulsory. If you're a Muslim, you have to do it, And on top of that, we have sadaqah, which is the extra stuff that you give on an ongoing basis. So that also helps, helps to create I don't want to say equality, but at least taking care of people who need it. And that is built into Islam. It is built into Christianity. You have to take care of the poor. And so again, this is something, even if the state doesn't do it, because if the state takes money, they'll probably use it to build the roads, to build this, to, all of the other public services. But, taking care of your neighbor, about a woman who lost her husband, or kids who are, that is where community comes. And it's so important for those values to be pervade every part of our lives, and also for children to be taught that.
Yeah.
For my son, for example, in university, he's on a tight budget. But I tell him, Ahmed, if you see any boy, if he's struggling, and buy him a meal, So these are values that we have to instill in our kids, just so they don't feel a sense of, superiority over other people. And I tell my kids, instead of buying an expensive bag or buy something that is reasonable, and if you have extra money, give it away. So it's all about balancing the way you live and extending those values to your kids.
No, 100%. On a moral level, I agree with you completely, right? So the way I'd see this, if I know that you are wealthier than me, and I see somebody I think you'd want to help, what would be wrong of me to do is to secretly take your money and give it to this other person. But for me to go and talk to you and say, hey, Sana, there's somebody I think you can help here, and then you give voluntarily, that in my mind is a moral good, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I 100% believe the rich should take care of the poor. Who should they answer to that for? God himself, right?
I agree.
Right. I don't want them to answer to the Seattle City Council for that.
I agree. The problem, you see, even I feel like government already takes a lot of money. Already.
100%.
But a lot of that money is going to places that like for war, for the, for defense systems, for things that maybe we can't even talk about here. But the point is, that money, instead of it being used for destructive means, use it to save the people here. Pay for the people here, your constituents, your population. They deserve it more than any other cause outside of your country. So I think the money is there. By the way, the one thing, and I don't know if I can switch to this, but I feel it's something that I'm very excited about is I have a couple of platforms, World for Good, which talks about blueprints for a better world, and Tempo Magazine, which is about celebrating everyday people doing extraordinary things. But the one thing that I'm recognizing is the power of the people. This is social media. Social media comes in with a lot of destructive and very negative permutations as well. However, one of the most exciting, the coolest things that's happening with social media now is these super influencers who have, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million people. And their whole platform is about going and helping people. So these are the quote unquote rich that are not the conventional rich people we were talking about, but these newfound, newly minted, newly established influencers who are using their platforms and the power of social media amplification to help others. And I don't know if you're familiar with these, but we're keeping a record of, so far, I think we have maybe 30, 40, 50 of these people. They go up and they help people. They take you out. And how do they do it? Through crowdfunding. And this, for me, is a beautiful example of how community comes together. Maybe it's not coming together, face to face in the traditional way, but using crowdfunding and coming in and just rescuing families, helping them, buying a car for a family, helping immigrants, helping people who are sick, and they don't have insurance and all of that. So I think this new wave in social media just really appeals to me, and one of the things that I will be doing actively is to promote these everyday people doing extraordinary things.
See, that's fantastic. So this is what's really important to me right now. I think the moment we're in is an environment where people are being constantly told to look at what the government is doing and feel either excited or really depressed. They're waiting for the next president, the next mayor, the next whatever to kind of fix all their problems for them. And I think most of the problems in the world we can solve without their help. I think just by regular people trying to do good to their neighbors, I think the world can change that way. We don't need to wait for the next.
We don't need to wait. It's the power of the people, the power of technology, the power of connecting people. So when in a crowdfunding situation, James, it's amazing. So the guy talks to somebody who's who has her daughter. They're living in the street. They're struggling, trying to be positive and all of that. They talk to them, and suddenly, boom! They have all this money. They give them the cash they can live in a home and all of that. So yes, power of the people, and this is where I think social media can completely transform people's lives who have been neglected by other means.
100%. There's a real opportunity to make a difference in the world, as long as you're not just paralyzed waiting for someone else to do something.
Totally.
Well, Sana, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
And I'm disappointed we agreed on everything. I was ready to fight with you,
Yeah, okay, well, maybe next time, okay? We'll do it in Abu Dhabi, or we'll do it here back in Seattle when you're back.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys for listening to the Al-Maida Initiative podcast. We will be back next time.